How's it going, everybody? My name is fallinghurts, and today I wanted to ask you a question. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I really wish there was a game that elicited that same feeling of The Walking Dead Season 1? And obviously, you're a smart person. You've said yes already, and boy, do I have just the game for you. Of course, I'm talking about Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days, or as I like to call it, It'd Odd. And it'd be really odd if you didn't want to play the game after everything I have to say. This isn't an ad, this isn't sponsored, this is a review. But I genuinely feel this is one of the games that most deserves your time in 2025. It's an early access game. It just launched on April 9th, and it comes from the developer called Pickpock. And as I've already said, it's a post-apocalyptic game, but what's really interesting about it is it's not a first-person thriller or a third-person gore fest like you would really expect from the genre. But really, it's more like the princess is in another castle because Mario, we're going 2D side-scroller on this one. And while it's not like a point-and-click game or anything like that, the depth of gameplay and the narrative told through that gameplay is really, really special, even in this early form without all features present. And I guess I should make it clear that you can complete the game in its current form. Just with the roadmap just being revealed, it seems like it's going to be a lot more interesting to do it maybe at that 1.0 release. That being said, however, I'm standing on business that this is still a game that absolutely deserves your time right now. Not to mention, you buy the game now, you'll probably get it for a cheaper price than its full release. And with that being said, what is Into the Dead? Well, straight up, it is both a resource and base management game, as well as a side-scrolling 2D stealth action game. And I know that's like a lot of buzzwords, whatever, but the tension presented within managing your base, your characters, and your resources, all the while actually having to kind of put your hands on the wheel and control one of those characters each turn, is truly something special. The game starts by you choosing a starting duo, and there are quite a few to choose from. And the main distinction, other than the actual characters themselves, which that really doesn't matter because the story isn't anything to write home about, the main objective is to escape Walton City. But again, you're going to pick your characters, and they each have different traits. Generally, there's a few positives, like being able to eat pretty much anything without getting sick, or evading all damage, or maybe having an extra backpack slot while going on runs. But then they also have a few negatives, such as eating junk food will lower morale, or even that they can't cook. And so choosing your starting characters can be a pretty big boost to your gameplay, depending on how you want to play. And you can, over time, kind of find characters within some of these levels and recruit them. You can turn them away, but I think the only negative to actually recruiting them is that they are just more mouths to feed. And for reasons I'll get into in just a minute, it'll become very clear that that's just not really that big of a deal. The benefits far outweigh the negatives on that one. And so once you pick your starting characters, you will be set off into your starting base with the objective, obviously, of survival, but to escape Walton City. And in doing so in the early parts, it literally is just going on runs and trying to collect resources to stay alive in the hopes of finding something out. Eventually, you will get, kind of set on a plot line, a thread of finding different clues. And these clues can look something like finding radios within the levels that have faint signals of people talking about somewhere to land a helicopter. Or on the inverse of that, there could be graffiti painted all over manhole covers, kind of indicating that there may be a group of people moving throughout the sewers. As far as I can tell, these are the two major, escape routes within the game as of right now, and there are a couple different variations of each, depending on how you take some of the information given. Although these plot lines do kind of narrow after a little bit, they become more of a go here and do this style mission structure. While it's not very long, I do think there is a lot of room for role-playing if they kind of expand, whether this be some of these conversations that you have, or whether it be, prerequisite for if they ever add skills to each individual character. I think that could be really cool too. But as of right now, I'm satisfied with what it is because the game leans a lot heavier on the survival mechanics with the idea of, the objectives are meant to keep you going and with something to do. The true narrative of Into the Dead actually comes entirely from your gameplay. For instance, here's how mine started and continued forward. I chose 2 dudes as my starting characters, and within a few runs, one of them quickly became overwhelmed and died. And while I'll break down exactly how the base operations work in just a minute, things were looking pretty dire because with only 1 character left, dwindling resources because I couldn't go on runs and restore my barricades to my base all in the same amount of time, things were looking very bleak. So my Hail Mary was to continue to a promising looking place with a lot of resources where I actually found a second character in the attic of a church. His name was Rahul, and he carried with me all the way till the end of the game, with a revolving cast of other people I picked up along the way who, some of those died, some of them didn't, but the bond I imagined that the original guy and Rahul share after that moment is just such a cool thing to me, especially considering the fact that you grow attached to these different characters with their traits, and their usefulness, just straight up, is entirely linked to how you feel about them and what you're using them for. So eventually, towards the end of the game, I actually got to a point where all of my characters either needed healing because they'd been going out on runs or needed help. I'd been sheltering the old man from the beginning of the game because I felt like he was more of a base builder, and one of his traits was actually that crafting weapons was cheaper for him. So I had kind of been keeping him at the base. He was more of a homebody. Well, it just made sense that one of the pivotal missions in the escape route that I was choosing, I didn't have anybody to go on the run that day. And when I finally decided he needed to be the one to go, it just felt very, very special, important. And in that mission, when I almost lost him, it was a very nail-biting experience. And those moments, whether it be in the early game when I only had 1 guy left, or later in the game when I'm fearful to even lose him, even with 3 or 4 other backup characters, it doesn't matter. The connection, the immersion, everything about Into the Dead, Our Darkest Days strives perfectly to be that zombie fiction that you want. All right. So I've talked enough about the narrative, the story, and how all of that works, and even how it ties into the gameplay itself. But to actually break down what the gameplay is and what I like and dislike, because there are some things, you can break it down very easily into 2 categories. The base sections, which are more of a resource and character management simulator, and then actually going on runs, which is where you Jesus take the wheel and actually control one of the individual characters as they stealth through, combat even, and loot their way through these very unique and diverse and well-crafted locations. Starting with the simpler of the 2, the base aspect of the game is something that I don't really have a lot of notes about, except knowing the fact that they will expand it a lot during the early access of this game. Outside of things like wanting more specific skills for characters, and an actual reason to maybe not trust recruiting someone other than just having another mouth to feed, like perhaps they could leave in the middle of the night stealing half of the loot or something, and you just have to really pay attention to who and how they were before you even met them. I think stuff like that would be really cool in building up that fear factor. But with the game in its current form and where it's at, I really like how it works. So in your base starting out, you've got the basic crafting table, a bed or some beds, and a place where you can build up your barricade. Your barricade is basically your base health. Say that 3 times fast, I dare you. And the idea is that the game is broken down, each day is broken down into a day and a night. And for each one of those, whether you have 2 people in your base or 5 people in your base, for each of those cycles, you can set them to do a task. Obviously, one person will go on a run, and that's the one that you'll actually play through that time. However, the old guy, I could have him crafting weapons while the other people are out. I could have one person working on the barricade, regaining some health is essentially how that works. And then I could have somebody else cooking food for everybody to actually eat later. And it's in that way that with countless different crafting tables and frankly jobs to do, there's never a reason not to recruit someone. So you can kind of see why I really want to lean into that. That said, though, I feel like the base management aspect of the game is pretty rewarding. I feel like the stress of having to get proper resources to either upgrade your benches or keep your base safe is always a really fun, juggling act to do. One minor issue I did have is that the game map is quite large. And as you're only going from location to location, for runs, there's no way to increase the radius or the range of your travel from your home base. So if there's a specific place that you want to go, whether it be for a quest or an item that you want, and it's out of your radius, you actually have to look for a different building or location that is arbitrarily marked as someplace that you can make your new shelter. You've got to go on a run, clear it out completely, and then you can move everything to that base. I don't mind this system in general. I think this is good. I think the idea of base hopping is cool, especially when the dead start to really do a lot of damage to your current base, to kind of get them off your trail. I like this aspect, I do. But what I don't like is that as you go from location to location, it gets the general feeling like it doesn't mean anything. Like, you don't think that you'd want to just keep moving from base to base, especially when the main story is jerking you back and forth across the map. The idea that you would want to keep going from one base all the way back to the other one just to kind of go to those mission objectives. I would much rather finding like a working car or something, and then that expanding our travel radius. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but the idea of not having to move bases all the time, especially when the layouts of these can be sometimes a bit annoying. So adjusting to a new base and finding all those different crafting tables can be a bit of a nuisance at times. All that said though, I will say going on runs genuinely is one of the best feelings that I've had in playing a game in 2025. Obviously, if you're looking at it from like a narrative standpoint, it's phenomenal. Like, just those intense moments that always play out are so cool. Not to mention the game plays with its 2D perspective very, very well. Obviously, this game takes place in a 3D setting, but you are on that 2D rail, and all of the enemies that are actually active are as well. There are sometimes zombies in the foreground and the background that are a little less aware of your presence. If you just sneak through the room, they won't ever give you any trouble. However, if there are, some dead in the foreground or the background, you may not even notice them. You may become kind of tunnel visioned on your character. If you make too much noise, they will actually run out onto that 2D track and become active enemies. And so that's a tension that you have to worry about, especially as each of your melee weapons within the game, even when doing a stealth takedown, make a certain amount of noise. Your best item in the game is like a broken glass bottle. It makes like no sound, but it breaks after one stealth kill. And that is something that I do love about the game. There's a give and a take with all of the weapons within the game. The guns within the game, handgun, the pistol, it was good. It was like, I don't want to say less reliable, but less reliable really. But like, you don't have like a reticle, you just have like the flashlight, which thankfully the dead don't notice the flashlight. It's kind of like The Last of Us in that way. But you're never 100% sure if the gun will actually hit or stop them in time perfectly. Maybe it would be cool if that were a trait that you could get for a character, as they actually do have more, precise aiming, better like reticle or something like that. That would be cool. That way it would show the difference of maybe like a former cop versus like a civilian or something. But all that being said though, I think the actual combat, like if you are detected by enemies, is good enough. I mean, it's a little basic in the sense that it's really just swing or dodge, and the dodge I think is a little funky, especially when playing with keyboard, because you have a tendency to want to kind of back off of enemies. But since there's no lock on, if you decide to start to walk away from them, you will face the other direction. And since you can't move out of the way in time, you might be inclined to dodge. Dodging automatically takes you backwards, meaning that if you start to try to walk away from an enemy when they're going to swing and then want to dodge even further away, you will back into their swing. So I'm not saying there needs to be a lock-on for the game, but I think it would help immensely. Or on the inverse of that, maybe just make it to where if you're in direct combat, it just doesn't make you immediately try to face the other way unless maybe you're sprinting. Because I feel like then that's like a pure like disengage tactic. Like if you're sprinting, you're not trying to fight. Same goes with actually vaulting through windows. The zombies within the game can do so very quickly. They just are reckless abandon, throwing themselves over ledges to try to get to you. And you can kind of use the environment to your advantage in that way to kind of maybe throw them down into a pit that they can't get out of, that you can jump over, but they can't. But that's another thing. If, let's say, you get a head start, you're running, you're climbing through a window, your guy always goes through the window super slow. And it's in those moments that they'll get a few good hits on you, and you'll never get the opportunity to do the same to them. This gets a little better, but kind of on the inverse when there are human enemies within the game. They are a lot more rare, but they kind of have the same moveset as you for the most part. They can jump over the same ledges. They can climb up ledges, they can climb down ledges with the same grace that you have. And generally speaking, it's kind of more of a met your match sort of situation. But again, the game plays with perspectives in wonderful ways. Something that's really fun with the stealth that I absolutely adore, and I say that literally adore, is that when you approach like a closed door, because zombies, they won't interact with the doors unless they are aggravated. Then they can and will break them down. However, if you walk up to a closed door, you can kind of lean into it, kind of peep through it, and then it'll give you like a limited view into the next room. At the bare minimum, within the first few feet in front of you, being able to see if there's a zombie maybe right there facing you or potentially facing the other way, giving you ultimately the all clear to open the door, sneak in, and kill them. And it's all sorts of little things like that that go a long way. If I had any complaints about the runs and like that part of the gameplay, it would be this. It would be, first off, more ease of use when traversing, as I've already mentioned, as well as during the combat. I also believe that there aren't enough notes around the game world. There's a lot of environmental storytelling, and even some of the items you pick up. For instance, finding police batons in the police station. That's all really cool, and it's varied in such a unique way that there's just so much attention here that the game world already feels populated with detail. It just feels like they need to add these, other additions to really fill out a rich experience overall. But I do feel like there needs to be more notes around the game world to kind of give more indications and maybe even a little bit of emotion to what's happened here so far. The opening game cinematic is never matched in any meaningful way when it comes to storytelling, and that is a bit sad to me. But in general, though, those runs with a lot of the gameplay you're seeing here really does show exactly what I love about this game. And if you really want to see my favorite part of this game, the most intense, shocking, and horrific moment that there is for me to see in this game, stick around to the very end of the video. I don't want to spoil it unless you opt into it. I feel like this will sell you on exactly what this game is. But if you don't want to watch it, you want to play it for yourself, you're already sold, don't even watch the last however many seconds of this video. And that brings me perfectly into the final part of the video that I really wanted to touch base with, and that is the presentation. Technically speaking, I think the game runs okay. I think it could definitely run better. It could use some optimization. I've got an RX 9070 XT, a brand new graphics card from AMD, and a 9700X from AMD for processor. And the game, I don't want to say chugs. I never had bad frames, but I had a hard time getting much above 60. I mean, there were some instances where it was higher, in the base or in certain smaller environments, but when the detail of these levels, which they are very detailed, ramped up, the frames went down in meaningful ways, which wouldn't be a major problem except for the fact that I am concerned that there are not a lot of graphics settings within the game. You can tweak the global illumination and some of that sort of stuff and general quality, but you don't have detailed versions of everything. You can't change shadows, textures, and everything individually. And I do think that's a bit of a shame because different graphics cards and different PC settings can make a big difference. For instance, if somebody has an RTX 3070 with an 8GB of VRAM compared to my 16GB of VRAM, maybe that'll be different at 2K, 1080p, 4K. There's a lot of differences in this game, and especially because I do think I noticed there is some built-in upscaling in the game, but there's no upscaling option in the settings. So I'm a little confused about that. The reason I say that is because I noticed a little bit of artifacting here and there. Like if you look at your character really closely, some of the pixels kind of ghost a little bit, and I'm not Digital Foundry, but like I can notice it. And maybe that's just like Unreal Engine thing. I don't even know if the game's Unreal Engine. And maybe that's just like a built into the engine thing, but even still, I noticed it, so it's there. The actual visuals for the game itself are pretty good. There is some level of pop-in, which considering you're not seeing any further away than what the game actually wants to show you in the background, but more so that like bushes and plants have like an LOD, and if like you're on the right side of the screen, on the left side of the screen, they might be lower quality, and then as you get closer, even on max settings, there's pop-in, and I think that's really, really bizarre. Outside of that, though, whether you're going through a church and the light on the panes shows the different colors through, or, an explosion in the background in the cityscape to really up the ante of the tension to any number of the environments that you could see, from the devastation that was the infection of Walton City. There is a lot of immersion here, and there's so much to enjoy. Whether you're on the day or the night cycle on these runs, it's beautiful. There's so much that the game plays with its lighting, and it's a good thing that of all the settings, you do have ultra lighting settings. Finally, with the audio, this one is a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think the sound effects, the sound cues for detection, and little audio bits for important moments are very, very good. The zombie sounds are great. The footsteps and the floor above you telling you exactly where the infected are, phenomenal. But then there's like an audio sync issue, and it just feels like two zombie audios are playing for one infected in a loop, and they're like overlapping, and it sounds terrible. It gives the vibe that there's multiple when there may only be one. And while that's not frequent, it's something that happened enough that I did notice it. Another thing of note, the human characters within the game do not speak whatsoever. In the dialogue trees, I don't actually care about this. It didn't bother me whatsoever. Not an issue. But when you actually have human enemies, it felt weird that they had no sound cues, especially when they have little text pop-ups saying that they are yelling, but they wouldn't actually make any sound, even if it was just like a scream or something, not actual words. It felt weird that you could hear the infected a mile away, but these humans who were actively speaking at you, you couldn't hear them at all. It was a bit jarring, and in that way, I feel like the audio is a bit touch and go. That said, though, I feel like I've covered everything I need to cover. I've tried to throw out as much constructive criticism as possible, and that is what it is. I want this game to succeed because I love everything about this game. I finished my first run. I've only done one run, to be fair. I haven't done both sides. But I plan on going back through and doing another plotline here soon after I get some of these next couple reviews that I'm swamped with out of the way. And if that's something you would like to see, consider subscribing. And let me know what you think of this mic setup. I know it's a little touch and go. I just got a condenser, like an XLR thing. And it's really weird. I need to be kind of a little closer to my mic than I need to. So if I'm a little quieter at certain parts, that's why. But yeah, thank you for watching and enjoy this clip. Goodbye.